Let's talk about
We got Christmas coming up, right? And we're hosting her family and mine both for Christmas. So we're like scrambling to get ready.
It's like the Griswold's family Christmas. It's so like you're doing the Griswold Christmas. Oh my god!
Are you gonna to get it ready?
Are you gonna do like the 10,000 twinkle lights?
Yeah. So we've already got all of our lights outside. We got our lights inside. We got our tree. We got all of our decorating done. Now we're just trying to get guest rooms put together and build furniture.
Oh my god!
We're scrambling.
Wow, you're doing the whole kit and caboodle. You're doing the whole show.
Yeah, we are.
That's impressive. Oh my god, that's amazeballs. I love it. That's great. All right, well let's get this show on the road.
Let's do it.
All right, tell the world who you are. Who is Allan Alford?
Howdy, I'm Allan Alford. I'm NTT Data Services Delivery CISO. That's my day job. I'm a podcaster. I am the co-host of the Defense in Depth podcast. It's a weekly podcast available pretty much everywhere, iTunes and Google and Spotify, you name it, we're available. Defense in Depth, the idea is we take one topic from the world of information security each show, and we go into it in depth. Aren't we clever? So that's me.
It's not just a play on words.
It is a play on words. We go into it in depth. That's what we do.
Nice. I love it. So now you've been in this for quite a while, right? Like me, you kind of grew up as a hacker. Let's talk about that. So
so good Lord, I'm
McDonald's at 13 and Arby's.
Yeah, I'm giving away my age now. I'm going to be giving away my age. But when I started, there were no laws on the books. In the early 80s, when the IBM PC first came out and the Apple IIs came out and that era.
Oh, you're talking about like the straight up Fraud and Abuse Act of 1987. That was like predates that. Oh,
yes,
my
I'm
God.
before
you
that
are
too.
Not that old, Allan. Come on.
I am before all that.
Don't start talking about punch card.
My name is Bubbles. I'm popularly known as this name because my grandmother watched me being born and she announced I would be called Bubbles.
Right. So my dad was a mainframer. My dad was I'm actually second gen InfoSec. My dad was a mainframe security guy. He was a systems analyst and his specialty was security. And so when the IBM PC first came out, he got one, brought it home and set it up with a modem, and he would dial into work and get work stuff done. So pretty soon I learned about, hey, there's a computer on the desk with a modem that dials in and connects to other computers. And meanwhile, good friend of mine down the street had an Apple II, and another friend had a TRS-80, and another friend had a TI-99. And basically, we started realizing it didn't matter what the platform was, we could all kind of do the same kind of stuff. We got into BBSs, and we got into war dialing.
BBSs, no.
We were doing all that good stuff, right?
Renegade and Oblivion and God.
All that good stuff. The Mines of Moria and whatever else we were part of.
Oh my God.
And so we got into all that stuff, and we would war dial, and we would find interesting things that, it's like, hey, it answered the phone and it was a computer. Let's go see what it is and does. And this was, back in the days of 2600 hertz and all those good tricks. Oh. So we got into all kinds of fun stuff.
Nerd!
Homer, that isn't very nice.
Marge, try to understand. There are two kinds of college students. Jocks and nerds. As a jock, it is my duty to give nerds a hard time.
And my triumphant moment from that era was breaking into my dad's mainframe.
Nice. Wait, the one at your dad's work? That's awesome. That's awesome.
I knew the phone number to call because he had that on his desk, right?
How did dinner go that night at the table?
Yeah, so it was awesome because I was down the street at my friend's house using his Apple IIe, and we've got the modem, and this is the old acoustic coupler modems, like we're talking old school here. And we dialed in the number that I had jotted down off my dad's notes on his desk, so I knew the number to dial. We get greeted with a prompt. It's an operating system with which we're not familiar at all, but from looking at my dad's notes and kind of watching over his shoulder, I learned some stuff that he did and a little bit about how it worked. And so we basically guessed one of his coworkers' passwords and were successful and logged in with his coworker's account. And so I took a screenshot and printed it on the old dot matrix printer. But I took this screenshot of, look, here's me logged into your mainframe, Dad.
Hide the planet! Hide the planet!
Shut up and get in the car!
Hide the planet!
And I came running back home from my friend's house, and I threw it on my dad's desk and said, "We just hacked into you."
That's amazing. Did the allowance get affected? Did you get grounded?
Oh no, he loved it. He was thrilled. Thought it was absolutely awesome that I was able to pull that off. Number one, and number two, it was his coworker who got the lecture, not his kid. Don't have easy to guess passwords, right?
Yeah, back when before brute forcing was the thing. Yeah, that was
right. Don't have easy to guess passwords was the lecture he gave his coworker, but he was, he pretended to be stern with me, but you could tell he was proud.
That's amazing. That's awesome. So tell us about your career. I mean, you didn't obviously start out at NTT Data,
right? So the hacking thing was all through middle school, and then in high school I discovered girls.
Damn! Look, she bending over. Hi, Miss Parker. Hi, boys. Miss Parker just don't know.
And quit hanging out with computers. Started hanging out with girls
first
instead.
Three-dimensional girlfriend. That's amazing.
So that was a sudden shift, right? So I didn't get back into computers again until college, honestly. And but I always had those skills. I was writing and porting my own video games by the time I was in 8th grade. I was porting and writing games and doing all kinds of stuff. So even though I took 4 years off, it's not like those skills go away. So I get to college and I'm working on a liberal arts degree, and I'm the only person in my entire program apparently with any computer skills. So I became that guy everyone goes to for computer help, and I was that guy. So kind of as the token computer guy in the liberal arts community at the school I was going to at the time, I was actually at TCU in Fort Worth, and got back into computers that way, even though I was doing liberal arts by education, which is what I was really most interested in. The computing technology, I very quickly got back into it. And so I started trying to fuse the two disciplines, and I ended up transferring over to UT. And there's a woman named Sandy Stone. I don't know if you know her. Really, really, really strong player in the cyber scene. Early 90s, she was the queen of cyber. Theory and practice, all kinds of stuff. She worked in all kinds of gender identity projects, just identity period projects. It was this real fusion of technology and culture. And she ran a lab out of UT called the ACT Lab, ACT, which stood for Advanced Communication Technologies. And the whole idea was it was this mishmash. It was this group of people that all kind of gathered around her. Everybody came from different departments around the campus. Everybody had a different focus and a different bent, but everybody was there because they were interested in technology and interested in culture and working together to try to find out how those two could work together, right? So my big project for her undergraduate, this was an undergraduate project for me, is I developed a MOO. I don't know if you remember the multi-user object-oriented. Text-based virtual reality, object-oriented programming language. So I developed a MOO, and we called it Point Moot, Texas, and we made it after a fictitious Texas town. And we built a virtual economy. We had virtual governance models. It was crazy. We had at its peak about 2,500 users. And Wired Magazine wrote us up. We got all these different, we got written up in books and academic journals and all kinds of projects. We basically built an entire virtual society. We kept throwing all these different models into the mix that people could experiment with, there was a capitalist stock market, there was socialism, there was housing, there was welfare. We had almost the entire
Your own little
participation
Sin
of
City.
Yeah. And the whole workforce of the town was all bots, right? That was another thing, is we all really got into bots. And so we were writing these really ambitious, really aggressive, mashing, and again, back to technology meets liberal arts, right? I was doing Markov chains, and I was doing actual, you remember in middle school when they made you diagram sentences?
Mm-hmm.
Picture taking a sample, because everything is recorded and logged in this entire virtual environment, because it's an academic study thing as well, right? And everybody knew that when you logged in, everything you do is being recorded, consent or bugger off, right? And so I had every single piece of conversation that had ever taken place in the environment all saved and archived. And I took it and I fed it into what was basically a sentence diagramming engine that I wrote. And it deconstructed all the sentences until I finally had a master list of, I forget how many it came down to, but it was like, I think it was like 31 of these templates covered 90-something% of every sentence ever uttered in that moo. And so now I had a structure, and now I could play with algorithms like Markov chains and predictors and other things. Kind of like, like in modern technology, your phone starts to sort of do a little bit of predictive texting for you, right? It's the same phenomenon. I was writing all this stuff from scratch, though. I had no idea what I was doing, and got it to the point where I had bots that would speak in formal and real sentences, that the words they chose for the most part actually aligned and made sense. And it got to the point where we were challenging our users by throwing all these bots out there and disguising them as people. And of course, we had full control over the environment. So all the commands that would let you see who was logged in, it would show these bots as being people logged in. And we had full environmental control, but the goal was to just fool people and see how long we could string people out with thinking these bots were actually other people.
Wow.
And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So kind of this weird mishmash of liberal arts and technology. And I taught myself Unix. I taught myself object-oriented programming. I mean, all these kinds of crazy projects. I just kept amassing more and more technical knowledge while still continuing to work on liberal arts in school. So I finally ended up with a liberal arts degree and a career in computing.
Wow.
Sort of.
Interesting.
One day I looked up and I had a real job, and I was like, oh yeah, it's got nothing to do with my degree, but hey, here's all these skills I developed.
So how did you fall into? So, I mean, I'm trying to fast forward in your career. You went through different roles, blue team, red team, I'm assuming, did some, log analysis work, penetration testing work, probably.
Yep.
So, and then fast forward to now, you're the Delivery CISO for NTT. What is a Delivery CISO?
So NTT Data Services is a services company. We're an IT services company. You're a business, and let's say that you decide you want to outsource your help desk. Just, people call the help desk for support, and somebody walks them through and enters a ticket, and did you reboot it, and did you try this and try that? You could outsource your entire help desk apparatus. That's one service we offer. You could outsource your entire IT shop. That's another service we offer. We also do custom application development. We do business process outsourcing. So pretty much any kind of business service you could ever think to outsource, potentially we could do the entire thing for you. So that's NTT Data Services. We're a services company. And my boss, who's the enterprise CISO, for a period of time was the CISO at NTT Data Services. And he went upstairs and told the folks upstairs, he said, look, we really need to double down on the delivery aspect of what we do. We need to devote a role, a CISO role, an executive security role, to the delivery practice itself. And so they invented the role of the delivery CISO. The idea is that I'm the CISO not for the internal corporate landscape, but for all these many customer environments that we have out there.
So your responsibility, your AOR, is to engineer security solutions for the services that you guys provide to your customers, or your job is to secure your
So
customers?
governance, reference architectures. The idea is whatever service we provide. If you look at it another way, I'm a CISO whose estate is 1,000 environments instead of one. Okay.
So ADD poster child, focus on one new problem and one new customer every few minutes.
There you go.
That's
so
amazing.
I've got a whole team backing me. We're very matrixed. We have an internal corporate CISO who's a great guy. Okay. We got our enterprise CISO, and we've got me. So there's actually 3 CISOs, which is It's amazing to have this much firepower.
Well, I was about to say, but I know that seems like a lot to some people, but if you think about it, the size of NTT is a huge company. I mean,
Well, so
I don't
the
know
NTT empire is vast, absolutely vast. I think there's 900 and something companies in the NTT empire. I don't know the exact figure, but I think it's up there around 900. But there's NTT Inc., there's NTT Holdings, there's NTT Limited, there's NTT Data, and we're Data Services, which is a subsection of Data, which is a subsection of Inc. and Holding, and et cetera.
Right.
So we're doing about, if I'm hoping I'm getting these numbers correct, I think we do about $4.5 billion a year at Data Services. So we're big, but we're not great big. So 3 CISOs is a really nice. We're firing on 3 cylinders, and it's a good mix. I think it's done well. And we've got our corporate CISO who steers and drives all the usual stuff you would expect. The notebook computer I'm working on during the day is his jurisdiction, right? But then we've got our client environments as my jurisdiction, and then our enterprise CISO is there to sort of tie all that together and provide overall architecture and driving vision, but also interfacing into the rest of that gigantic NTT world that you're describing. So I just came back from a week in Tokyo where I got to meet all of my peers from all these other NTT companies, and we were all working together. It was the entire security community of the NTT world, all getting together for a week, and let's work together on standards and practices, and it was a really amazing week. It was good to meet all my peers from around the world.
What would the day in life be of a delivery CISO? So can you talk about, I guess, to help our audience better understand your role, can you talk about a current challenge you're facing right now that you're trying to work
sure.
with?
So I manage the GRC team. I mentioned before that we sort of share and we're matrixed. So the GRC team rolls up to me. And the reason GRC went to me is because GRC has a very high degree of utility in the customer space. Obviously, GRC matters for the internal corporate landscape as well, but it's got a very high presence for the customer space. Just like the security engineering team reports today on our corporate CISO, but they also have some implications for delivery. So we share, we cross-train, and we share resources, and we all work together. But the reason we grounded GRC down in my camp is because if you think about, let's say that you're one of the shops that we've outsourced, you've outsourced your entire IT operation to us. So now we are your IT organization. We've got all of our security policies that our GRC guys wrote. We've got all of your security policies that your people wrote. We've got the contracts that bind us together, which might be a master services agreement as well as individual statements of work as each new project and task is taken on. And then there's whatever laws and regulatory are involved. And then it's like, oh, you got an office in Europe and you've got an office here and an office there. And you can see where pretty soon, just to say what is security for this one environment, you're actually referring to 10, 12 possible sources that dictate what the security is and should be, right? And so my job is bringing all of that together and making sure that, okay, it's like, all right, you've got your policies here, I've got mine there. We've got a contract. Let's make sure the contract references the meaningful and relevant bits from both sets of GRC documents that we think actually need to be on the table and whatever we need to be doing. So there's a lot of policy work. There's a lot of contract work, working with legal, working with privacy. There's a lot of regulatory and legislative type stuff that's going on all the time in the background. At any given point in time, I have to be on top of, a dozen different sources of what does security actually mean in this environment, and coordinating that with the customer and making sure that everything is flowing smoothly and going according to plan.
That's interesting. Well, what's the most common framework that you've seen adopt? Are you dealing with ISO 27001 a lot? Are you dealing more with SCSP? I'm assuming as an international organization, you guys are so large, you guys probably have clients on every continent. I'm assuming the most common is ISO 27001.
It's both. I would say ISO and NIST, CSF are probably 50-50. In terms of what we see and who wants what. A lot of entities out there, even international entities, have embraced the CSF as their framework, just as many that have ISO 27001. So our entire GRC ISMS, right, is geared to go both ways, right? It's set up for either one. You can speak to us and about us and derive from us in a CSF manner or in an ISO manner. And we've had to develop a great deal of interchangeability to pull that off, but we've done it. So we speak both languages.
How many people are within your particular organization, within that report up to you?
Just within my team, and I'm counting new hires here that we just got. So we're sitting around 29 or 30.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good. That's pretty good size.
Yeah, and then the corporate team has its team, which is about the same size, and then the enterprise architecture team is smaller, but overarching and working with both of our functions. So yeah, it's again, we've got a lot of firepower.
So I'm assuming you guys will also engineer solutions. So if a client has a particular problem, let's say, for example, whether it's the delivery of a service you guys are providing them or not, will you guys actually go out there and find the best vendor solution or best vendor product for that?
So yeah,
for
and
that
this is where it gets really interesting. Yeah, it gets really interesting here because we're big, right? And we're one of the biggest services companies on the planet. All the vendors really, really, really want to work with me, because if they can win us over as a corporate entity, then potentially they're going to win over all of my clients as well, right? So to win over NTT is potentially to win over a couple thousand more companies, right? So that aspect is there. The vendors definitely want to work with us, and so we are a partner and a VAR with any number of other entities. All of that takes place. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, though. Everything I just described that I do is strictly in the sense of governing the services themselves. Note that some of the services we offer are, in fact, security services. So we have a whole nother organization within our delivery arm who are there to provide security services. And then we're also partnered with NTT Limited, which provides security services. So we've got, there's a lot of capability. And I can draw on resources from other organizations and other departments, and we can bring a lot of firepower to bear on a problem. If somebody is actually looking for an innovative new security solution to solve some particular problem or another, we've got that capability. I'm a big believer that GRC, GRC gets a bum rap, right? Because GRC is oftentimes regarded as sort of that secondary, not as important, some people off to the side writing policy that everyone ignores and check the boxes and go home. And I'm a big believer in policy should be real. It should matter. And to be real and to matter, it has to be bound to real world concerns, right? And so authoring a tool that helps bridge that gap between policy and the actual customer concerns, like that's the vision there.
So, future according to Allan, what do you see happening in 2020? I mean, this is big. This is the end of a decade that we're seeing come to an end, and man, that's huge. Cybersecurity. You and I worked in cybersecurity for roughly about the same amount of time, and I'm always telling people, like, we're living in a really exciting time for cybersecurity right now. There's a lot of new product categories being created. We got breach and attack simulation, CM moving security analytics, data lakes, machine learning. There's just a lot of really cool stuff happening right now.
There is.
What is your if you're just a fortune teller in cybersecurity, what does 2020 look like to you? Where's this headed?
I think all the ruckus about IoT is coming to a head. I think in 2020 we're going to see some legislation hitting the tables that's going to speak to IoT security. I think that we're going to have to see an uptick, a corresponding uptick in actual IoT security practice, because the legislation is going to drive it. So I'm expecting to see that change. I think IoT security is going to improve finally after however many years of everyone worrying about it, right, but not actually doing anything. And I think that's going to be driven by regulation is why that's going to happen. That's one of my predictions. Another big one I'd say is, this fad of, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain, right? Like those terms have been so used in the last few years. Yeah. Everybody's throwing those terms out as, it's going to solve everything, and our product has it and uses it and incorporates it. And the reality is the vast majority of what's out there that claims to be ML isn't. What claims to be AI isn't. What claims to be blockchain is not. But I think that 2020 we're going to actually start to see some real manifestation in those spaces. I think enough folks have been talking about it for 3-4 years now is when it first started coming up. In the last couple of years, especially, there's been so much hype in those three areas. I think this is the year that the ones that are hype only, it's going to start fading away because it's going to become obvious that it's hype only, and what's going to be left is the actual progress in those realms. And I think there will be some this year.
So, if you were to, look at a lot of the challenges and problems across the different engagements and the different customers, that you work with in your role, what have you seen as sort of the most common challenges across all those customers?
It's the same challenges I saw when I was a corporate CISO. I think everybody faces the same stuff. I really do. It's as a customer coming to me saying, "Hey, we want to outsource this, but we're concerned about that and the other in security." And what are their actual security concerns? They're the same concerns that I had when I was a corporate CISO. It's the same concerns everybody has, right? At the end of the day, you look at a framework like CSF, or you look at a framework like the CIS CSC 20, and you look at your actual practice and you say to yourself, how do I get more secure? These frameworks are a great guide that I can print out and stick up on the wall, but how do I bridge the gap from where I am today to what the frameworks are suggesting I do? And how do I get past that point of compliance and into that point of actually understanding my business from a risk-based perspective? And I think every client is having that same challenge, just like every CISO, whether they contract out to a services company or not. It's the same challenges that you're facing, right? So working with clients to help make that real, to help bridge that gap from, here's a great idea of an abstract framework over here, and meanwhile here's my practice over there. Let's bridge that gap. And I think that's really the greatest concern for all of us, really, is making it real and making it risk-based.
Would you agree that cybersecurity has really matured over the last 2 decades, where it really? I remember once upon a time it was shut everything down, lock it down. If if employees can't do their job, or things people can't do certain things, it was sort of like it was sort of accepted, right? And whereas cybersecurity is kind of matured now to be more of a business enabler, and you can see this sort of religious debate play out, between, in my views, cybersecurity engineers who are more junior to the more senior cybersecurity engineers who talk about cybersecurity being more managing risk. That they've been to the show, they've been to the rodeo, they know that the business isn't going to mitigate every single vulnerability. That if you deliver 10, maybe they'll fix 4. That it's all about managing risk, and that you're not going to completely eliminate that risk. So the only thing you can do is manage it. I mean, do you think that cybersecurity has really changed over the last couple of decades in that regard? I mean, it seems like cybersecurity really is. It's really become more of an enablement. It used to be a function of IT. It was a technology problem.
Right.
And now it's really being seen as a people problem.
Yeah, it is. And I, if you listen to my podcast at all, one of the themes that I'm constantly harping on is 90% of the battle is not technical. 90% of the battle is cultural, right? This is why in recent years I've really gravitated towards, give me the GRC team, right? I used to be the guy that was like, oh yeah, GRC, whatever. Paper pushers over there checking boxes off to the side while the rest of us get the security work done.
Risk assessment, come on.
Right. And now I'm the guy that's like, give me GRC. I want that function, because I really do believe it is a cultural battle. I really do believe it is a people battle, far more than a technology battle. You can deploy the latest tech. You can always, there's always going to be some cool new blinky light that comes out, some flashy toy that does the thing that last year wasn't doable. In between is that stage of the guys that claim they can do it and don't. You'll eval and trial stuff and send it back, and then eventually there's that one that, hey, these guys really are doing this new thing that everybody said one day we could do. Well, here they are doing it. Great, check the box, and then start all over again with the next big thing. I mean, so the technology comes and goes in these cycles, and it's always progressing steadily, but it's always competing with the bad guys' technology that's also progressing steadily. And sitting in the middle of all of that, like I said before, and you've already heard me say this, talking about my clients and working with them to bring their policy and make it real. It's the people battle, it's the cultural battle, it's getting the average citizen of your company on board. When we offer IT services to a company and we're offering to secure those services, there's security implications for both companies at that point, right? Like it's really, it's a compact. We are in this together to secure this thing. And it's about awareness. It's about education. It's about training. It's like you said, you have to be a business enabler. The idea that security is the roadblock, that's a dead paradigm. It's absolutely dead, because as soon as you build a roadblock, people are just going to go around it. They're going to dig a tunnel under it. They're going to climb over it. They're going to drive off into the lawn. You can't create obstacles in the name of security, because people are just going to work around it. So you have to take the fight to the people. You have to convince them security is our cause You have to get them on board with you, and you have to find ways to make security align with their workflow, their patterns, their behaviors. You can't just throw security at them anymore. Security is a dialogue now. Show me what you do. Show me what you do for a living, and I'll show you how we can cozy some security right into that process.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I like to end with a challenging question, a really deep philosophical question that just figure you on your chest. If a client could only do one thing, either a penetration test or a risk assessment, what would your advice be that they do, and why?
I would go with risk assessment over pen test.
Oh, yes! Yes, right? A man after my own heart.
And I would go with that.
Okay, why? But explain why.
If you're mapping your risks, right? If you're doing a true sort of threat model and risk map sort of exercise, you now know where the crown jewels are and where they might be vulnerable, right? A pen test is going to simply cover the technology surface of that roadmap you've built with a risk assessment. The risk assessment is going to be much bigger than a technology proposition. It's going to include all the people and processes and everything else we talked about, right? The pen test is only going to be scratching at one surface of what is a much larger surface represented by risk. And once you have that risk map done, you can actually start fixing and solving risks without ever having actually proven up their existence with a pen test, right? A pen test is almost an after the fact confirmation at that point. If a proper risk assessment is done, you can begin fixing based on the risk assessment and never even do the pen test. And by the time you can afford the pen test the next year, you found that you've already plugged half the holes anyway, right? So a proper risk assessment, I think, is a real foundation.
That is a great answer. That's exactly what I would say. It's funny. I always believe, you can't protect what you don't know you have. And right. I think one of the most valuable outcomes of an asset-based risk assessment is the asset register. If you look at a typical, traditional ISO 27005 risk assessment or whatever, you're creating your asset register, you're creating the asset, categories, you're doing a risk assessment against them. One of the most common things I find working with different CISOs in an ISO 27000 style risk assessment is just going through that exercise of trying to figure out what do you have and trying to determine what are your highest risk assets. Right. You can't, I think, in this new zero trust world, we know that we can't protect everything. We know we can't secure everything. We know that they're going to get it, right? It's not a matter of if, but when, and lowering that mean time to detection, lowering that dwell time, right? So, I think it's interesting to me because we know we can't secure all of it. So let's figure out what the most unacceptable risks to the business are and treat those risks. That's what I love about risk assessments.
Yeah, risk appetite is key, right? Risk appetite. And we were having this conversation, a couple of friends of mine and I were talking about this just the other day, that, one of the hardest things to do as a new CISO walking into a new organization is helping them understand their risk appetite, right? If cyber risk is not a concept they've ever played with before, how do you get them to see this is super scary, this is not quite as scary, this is not quite as scary, and somewhere on that scale is where you live. And you choose where you live. I don't tell you where you live on your risk scale. You do. And getting that across for that first time and coming up with that metaphor, that analogy, that sliding scale, that model, that map, that framework that helps them truly ground down and figure out where they really are with risk. I think that's probably one of the single biggest challenges as a new CISO coming into a new org. But I think it's a critical first step.
I agree. Okay, I lied. That was not my last question. I got one more. I love talking to GRC nerds because I'm a huge GRC nerd. So okay, it was interesting to me, just really getting into risk management and ISO 27. I went to the BSI ISO 27001 lead auditor training. And I got really big into ISO 27K, doing ISO 27K audits, risk assessments, creating an ISMS program, and helping them operationalize it. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is you would have these multi-billion-dollar conglomerates. Like I'm talking about like British Petroleum, like multi-billion-dollar companies. And you know what I'm about to say? They didn't have $1 million RSA Archer implementations or really expensive GRC tools. You're using spreadsheets, Allan. Spreadsheet. Yeah. Like, and I'm telling you, I'm not talking about like a really dinky little Excel workbook. I'm talking about like, it looks like somebody seriously spent their entire life creating the spreadsheet. It's like, I'm talking about spreadsheets that don't even look like spreadsheets anymore, but they were using Excel workbooks for their risk assessments, for their ISMS program, for their GRC as their GRC tool. Yep. How common is that?
I've seen it. I've seen it plenty of times. I've seen it. And it's interesting to me that the real tools in that space, there's been a real GRC tools revolution, I think, in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years now. There's a lot of strong players that have come out, a lot of SaaS-based offerings, a lot of cloud-based offerings that are all very much geared at the, like, let's say, the $1 billion mark and below type companies.
You're like the metric streams of the world and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Albris.
Yeah, Zen GRC and a bunch of others, right? There's some really fantastic tools out there now that are geared for the the medium to just starting to be a big business. But once you cross that line into those really big businesses, right, it always ends up being these incredibly sophisticated spreadsheets.
Yeah, sure. I know. Yeah, it's like they in some of them, like in some organizations, you're probably not going to be surprised when I say this, but all of the above. It was they had a really expensive RSA Archer implementation, high-priced $400 an hour RSA Archer consultants, and and spreadsheets.
And still using the spreadsheets.
Would still use spreadsheets.
Yeah,
it's crazy. But yeah, no, I'm wondering kind of what in your mind, being just so entrenched in that. Why do you think that is? Like, organizations that are doing billions in revenue and they're using spreadsheets for their GRC.
I would argue that a sophisticated spreadsheet that's had that much evolution to it, that much programming and macros and all the things going on, where if you put something into this field and these 8 things change over here, that kind of tool that's been truly developed is A, extraordinarily customized for your environment, and B, works.
Yeah, if it's not broken,
if it ain't broke, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I would almost rather see that solution than a really robust Archer deployment, frankly. Archer, it's like with the spreadsheets, you've got the guy that wrote it who inherited it from the guy that wrote it who inherited it from the guy that wrote it.
Yeah, it's passed down.
And it's evolved and passed down. But at any given point,
bastardized.
It's all right there. You can crack it open and look at the code. You can understand what's right into what. So even if your current owner of the spreadsheet suddenly leaves the company, you can still probably figure out what you have and get on track pretty quickly again. Versus with Archer, you've got this full-time dedicated staff that's all they do is Archer, right? And so, there's a real trade-off there. You're losing institutional knowledge with the Archer model versus the spreadsheet model. You're sustaining a lot more overhead with the Archer model, and I'm not sure that you're really getting all that much more than what you could get anyway. And frankly, you could be jumping on Allgress and solving the same problem for the same bigger companies as well. Allgress
that's true.
Allgress will scale up. It's one of the ones that will scale up. So, there's a lot of choices there, and I don't begrudge anybody their spreadsheets anymore. I used to, but there's any number of applications I've seen.
If it works, it works.
Yeah, exactly. Business processes all around the world and different companies I've worked for over the years, where one guy doing this one thing with a spreadsheet was solving these massive problems, and it's like, hey, him and his spreadsheet.
You're right, and
that works.
You're right, especially in this global talent shortage. It's easy. Like pretty much everybody knows Excel. It's a lot harder to find like an Archer consultant than somebody that knows how to hack up an Excel worksheet.
Exactly.
So with Christmas right around the corner, what are your final thoughts on the holidays coming up? Here it comes.
Ho, ho, ho.
Santa. That's amazing. And you're not going anywhere. You guys are you're spending Christmas at home doing the Christmas.
We're hosting. We moved up to the Dallas-Fort Worth area 6 months ago, and we, for whatever reason, decided we're going to host her family and mine for Christmas. So we are scrambling to we're not even moved in and unpacked yet, and we're hosting for Christmas. So we are.
Do you even have that many guest bedrooms? I mean, what is happening?
Two guest rooms. Two full guest rooms that we're fitting out, and then upstairs the college kids are going to be crashing on the futon upstairs, and we'll make it work. We'll have everybody in here.
Wow, that's amazing! The 10,000 Griswold twinkle lights and everything.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
All we're waiting for the cat to pull the tree over.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, Allan, it's been awesome. We've known each other for quite some time, and we have a lot of the same friends, and it's great to actually see you and put a face to the name. Actually, when you and I first met, you were over at Polycom, weren't you?
Yeah, I was the CISO at Polycom the first time we met.
CISO Polycom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you miss it?
I do miss Polycom. It was a fun shop. I was there 15 years.
You were there for a while.
Yeah, I was there 15 years.
You were part of the furniture.
Yep. I was there a long time.
So how can people reach you? How can people find you? I'm assuming
let's see here. Yeah, so LinkedIn is the best place to hit me up. LinkedIn, I'm Allan Alford, Allan Alford on LinkedIn. Hit me up there. I've got a very strong LinkedIn presence. I'm pretty active there. That's always the best place to start if you want to reach out.
Okay. All right. And then you've also got the Defense in Depth podcast. I look forward to being a guest too.
There we go.
That's that. All right, Allan. Well, have a very Merry Christmas, and thanks for being a guest on the show.
All right. You as well.
All right. Thanks, Allan.
Take care.